Think for a second. What if everything we know about our past is just a skillfully woven veil? What if beneath the layers of dust and centuries lie terrifying and scandalous truths capable of turning our understanding of humanity completely upside down? Imagine this. You hold in your hands a tool that, by all laws of logic, should not exist. A hammer embedded in stone, 100 million years old. This is not a myth, not a fantasy. This is something that makes your blood run cold. Someone created this hammer when dinosaurs still roamed the earth, long before the appearance of humans. What forgotten civilization left us this silent message? But that's just the beginning. In this video, we will delve into the darkest corners of history to find evidence that the ancient world was far more complex and disturbing than we are told. You will learn about an ancient Greek mechanism that was more complex than any known computer of its time, and whose technology was lost for a millennium and a half. What did it actually calculate, and why were its secrets so well hidden? We will show you a clay disc covered in undeciphered symbols that still holds the secrets of its creators, and about which scientists can say nothing except, "We don't know." And what about the crystal skulls, carved with a precision that seemed impossible for ancient artisans? Why do they cause such panic among some researchers? And, of course, you will see the Baghdad battery, an ancient artifact that could generate electricity. Imagine electricity in Babylon. What did it power? And why was knowledge of it erased from history? We will look at mysterious golden figures that look like flying machines, created thousands of years before the invention of airplanes. Perfect stone spheres weighing tons, made by a civilization that didn't even have the wheel. And also a book that no one on the planet has been able to read, whose illustrations provoke the most disturbing conjectures. And finally, we will touch upon the Ica stones, artifacts depicting scenes so brutal and impossible that they call into question not only history, but the very nature of humanity. These are not legends. These are not conspiracy theories. These are real artifacts, each a direct challenge to our understanding of the past. And believe me, what you see at the end of this video will make you rethink everything. Are you ready to discover the truth that lies beyond the history textbooks? Then buckle up. The journey begins. The most interesting, the most shocking awaits you at the very end. Imagine this. I'm holding a seemingly ordinary hammer, but every nerve in my body screams in disbelief. This tool was irrevocably embedded in stone that, by the most audacious scientific estimates, is 100 million years old. 100 million years. This isn't just a mystery, it's a defiance of logic itself. It means only one thing. Someone created this hammer long before humanity even appeared on Earth. How is this possible? And how many more such impossible, shocking secrets does our past hold in its unfathomable depths, capable of turning all our perceptions upside down? At times, discoveries turn our understanding of the past completely upside down, like a lightning bolt striking the very foundation of our knowledge. In this episode, I'll tell you about 10 truly mysterious artifacts that puzzle scientists worldwide. They force them to rack their brains, rewrite textbooks, and ask questions for which there seem to be no answers. Prepare yourselves. This will be a journey through time, full of incredible discoveries. Chapter 1. Introduction. Mysteries frozen in stone and metal. Since time immemorial, we, humans, have sought to leave our mark. We created objects that served as a mirror of our knowledge, our beliefs, our technological development. But among thousands of these testimonies, there's a special, astonishing category of discoveries. They are like strangers from another time, brazenly challenging everything we've come to accept as history. These objects simply fall outside the conventional context of their eras. They prove to be too complex, overly precise, or so enigmatic that traditional archaeology is simply unable to explain them. Let me illustrate the scale. These mysterious artifacts are found literally on every continent. They are unearthed from ancient ruins and deep underground chambers, from rock formations and the seabed, and even from within coal seams themselves. Analysis shows their age sometimes spans millennia, and sometimes entire geological epochs, millions of years. Some are crafted using technologies that, according to official science, should have emerged only on the cusp of industrialization. And yet, they exist. Their authenticity has been confirmed by independent laboratory studies, and it's shocking. So, you might ask, what are these wonders that so stir minds? These mysterious objects include clay discs with undeciphered symbols, highly sophisticated mechanisms based on complex gear trains, perfectly polished stone spheres, figurines strikingly resembling aircraft, and even purported electrical devices. Their level of craftsmanship often surpasses any known ancient engineering capabilities. In some cases, they bear traces of precision metalworking, high-temperature smelting, and even complex mechanical assembly, baffling even modern experts. For decades, these artifacts have become not just subjects of heated scientific debate, but also focal points for alternative researchers, proponents of forgotten civilization theories, and even extraterrestrial intervention. However, even within academic circles, opinions have long been divided. Some scientists insist that these findings are simply misinterpreted, while others are forced to admit that modern science simply lacks the tools and concepts for their definitive explanation. In this story, I will present to you 10 enigmatic objects. Each of them holds a tiny piece of lost history, a fragment of a grand puzzle. These are not legends, myths, or fantasies. All described artifacts have been genuinely discovered, thoroughly researched, and meticulously documented. And each of them poses to me, and thus to you, the same all-consuming question: how deeply into the past does the true history of humanity extend? Chapter 2. The Antikythera Mechanism. A computer from the depths of ages. I envision that shocking moment. In the early 20th century, specifically in 1901, Greek sponge divers stumbled upon a sunken ancient vessel off the coast of the island of Antikythera, which lies between Crete and mainland Greece. Among bronze statues, amphorae, and pottery shards, their attention was drawn to an unusual piece of rusty metal jammed within a rock fragment. At first glance, it seemed utterly useless, but upon closer inspection, dozens of small bronze gears were revealed inside. Before me was an object that changed everything. This mysterious object, named the Antikythera mechanism, was dated based on associated finds and the writing style on fragments of its casing. Scholars determined that the mechanism was created approximately between 150 BCE, that is, more than 2,000 years before the dawn of the industrial era. In total, over 80 fragments were found, from which about 30 gears could be reconstructed. Some of them had up to 96 teeth, which is astonishing. All components were made of bronze, and the casing was likely wooden. The device measured approximately 30 cm wide, 15 cm deep, and 10 cm thick. What, then, was the purpose of this marvel of ancient engineering? Using X-rays, computed tomography, and 3D modeling, researchers were able to reconstruct the mechanism's presumed structure. It turned out to be an incredibly complex analog computational device. It could have been used to calculate the astronomical positions of the sun, moon, and possibly planets, predict solar and lunar eclipses, and track cycles like the Metonic and Saros cycles. The Metonic cycle, for example, lasts 19 years and is used in lunisolar calendars, while the Saros is a period of approximately 18 years, after which eclipses repeat. Ancient Greek inscriptions were found on the mechanism's face, including month names and astronomical terms. One of the scales, it was revealed, indicated the staging of the Olympic Games and other Panhellenic competitions, suggesting its calendrical and social function. Before the discovery of the Antikythera device, mechanisms of comparable technical complexity from the ancient world were unknown. Devices similar in principle appeared in Europe only in the Middle Ages, roughly 1400 years later. The first mechanical astrolabes and geared clocks date only to the 10th–11th centuries CE. No analogues of the Antikythera mechanism have been found in all archaeological excavations. This suggests that the technology for its manufacture was either lost or kept in strict secrecy and used only by a narrow elite circle. Some researchers speculate that the device was linked to the scholar Hero of Alexandria, or even Archimedes, though there is no direct evidence for this. The very existence of such a mechanism challenges the established view of technological limitations in the ancient world. Its complexity requires advanced science, precise metalworking, and deep astronomical knowledge that would have been inaccessible without years of observation and sophisticated mathematics. The Antikythera mechanism is more than just an archaeological enigma. It's a window into the past, revealing a lost chapter in the history of engineering. It silently, yet eloquently, testifies. Ancient peoples were capable of far more than we could ever imagine. Chapter 3. The Phaistos Disc, a script no one can read. I can picture the scene. In 1908, on the island of Crete, within the ruins of the ancient Minoan palace of Phaistos, archaeologist Luigi Pernier, working under the direction of the Italian Archaeological Mission, made a discovery that is still considered one of the most enigmatic in the history of writing. The artifact found was a clay disc approximately 15 centimeters in diameter and 2 centimeters thick. Both sides were covered with a spiral inscription, composed of impressions of symbols stamped onto the wet clay. To preserve this message through the ages, the disc was fired after the text was applied, which contributed to its preservation for over 3.5 millennia. Each side of the disc features a total of 242 signs, arranged spirally from the outer edge to the center. They are grouped into 61 segments, implying a division of the text into words or phrases. A total of 45 unique symbols were used, making this writing system unlike any other known to science. This is a truly unique find. Look at these symbols. They depict a wide variety of figures, from a human head with a mohawk to a flying bird, a shield, a bow, a fish, a flower, a hand, and other objects, including abstract forms. Each symbol was created using a separate stamp, making the Phaistos disc the earliest known example of typographic writing, appearing several millennia before the invention of the printing press and Gutenberg in the 15th century CE. The main difficulty faced by researchers lies in the uniqueness of this script. It could not be compared to Linear A, Linear B, or any other writing systems existing on Crete during the same historical period. Furthermore, the language in which the disc is written remains unknown, making decipherment extremely difficult. There are no parallel texts, no translations, not even certainty about the direction in which the text should be read, from the center to the edge or vice versa. The disc's age is estimated to be approximately 17th to 16th centuries BCE, corresponding to the late Minoan period. However, due to the lack of analogues and context, its age can only be determined by the archaeological layer in which it was found, and its precise dating still causes debate. How many attempts, do you think, have been made to decipher it. Dozens. From the very beginning of the 20th century to the present day. Dozens of theories have been proposed. Some claimed it was a prayer, others a calendar, still others a divination guide or spells. Researchers have hypothesized that the language could be Cretan, Anatolian, Luwian, Hittite, or even entirely unknown to science. However, none of the decipherments has gained universal acceptance. I feel stumped. Of course, there were also those who raised skeptical eyebrows, expressing doubts about the artifact's authenticity. However, most experts agree that the disc is genuine. Its study using spectroscopy, radiography, and 3D scanning methods revealed no traces of falsification. Moreover, the find was made in a sealed archaeological context, making forgery highly unlikely. What is particularly intriguing is the absence of similar stamp-impressed signs anywhere else in Minoan culture. This could suggest that the disc was made for a special commission, or that it is a rare, perhaps sacred or cultic object. It has also been suggested that it might not have been created on Crete, but brought from elsewhere, for example, from Asia Minor or the Levant, which further complicates the determination of its linguistic nature. Today, the Phaistos disc is housed in the Archaeological Museum of Heraklion on the island of Crete. It remains unique and continues to captivate both professional linguists and enthusiasts and lovers of ancient mysteries. Despite over 100 years of scholarly effort, no researcher has been able to read this text with full certainty. The disc remains a silent witness to a vanished language, a lost culture, or perhaps a distinct, enigmatic tradition about which we know nothing more. Each symbol on its surface is like a voice from the depths of ages, frozen in the clay that humanity fired millennia ago. And until at least one inscription in the same language is found, the hope for definitive decipherment remains minimal. Chapter 4. The Crystal Skulls, a mystery carved in quartz, I pondered. Among the most famous and debated enigmas of archaeology, crystal skulls hold a special place. These artifacts are human skulls carved from a single piece of quartz, one of the hardest and most difficult minerals to work with on Earth. Each is crafted with incredible precision, often down to the minutest anatomical details. Their origin remains a subject of heated debate, bringing together archaeologists, mineralogists, mystics, and proponents of ancient civilization theories. Which one is the most famous? Of course, the so-called Mitchell-Hedges skull, named after the British explorer Frederick Albert Mitchell Hedges. According to his adoptive daughter Anna, the skull was found in 1924 in Belize, within the ruins of the Mayan city of Lubantun. However, this story is not supported by any archaeological reports, which already raises suspicions. It was later revealed that Mitchell Hedges acquired the skull at an auction in London in 1943, paying £400 sterling for it. The skull is made of clear quartz, measuring approximately 17 cm long, 12 cm high, and weighing about 5 kilos. It features a detachable lower jaw, carved from the same crystal as the main part. What is most striking? Under an electron microscope, no traces of modern cutting tools were found on it, and the quartz structure shows no signs of heating or mechanical deformation. This makes its creation process almost technically inexplicable, especially considering it was made in pre-Columbian America, where neither the appropriate technologies nor tools existed. Besides the Mitchell-Hedges skull, at least a dozen similar artifacts are known. Some of them are housed in major museums worldwide, including the British Museum in London and the Smithsonian Institution in Washington. The sizes, proportions, and styles of these skulls vary. Some are cruder, while others are executed with incredible anatomical precision. The material used is quartz of varying transparency, from milky to perfectly clear, with and without inclusions. What are the research findings? Studies conducted in the late 20th and early 21st centuries revealed contradictory data. In 1996, the Smithsonian Institution, using X-ray analysis and electron microscopy, concluded that the skull in their collection was made using abrasive tools available only from the mid-19th century. Similar conclusions were drawn regarding the skull from the British Museum. However, the question remains open. Even if most known specimens are 19th century creations, the very fact of their existence, especially given the level of detail, raises a logical question. Could technologies have existed in antiquity that allowed quartz to be processed with such precision without the use of modern tools? And what do proponents of mystical theories say? Some enthusiasts hypothesize that the skulls are ancient information carriers, capable of interacting with human consciousness or even storing knowledge of long-lost civilizations. These ideas draw inspiration from Mayan cosmogonic myths, where crystal skulls feature as relics handed down by the gods. According to these myths, 13 such skulls must come together to reveal the mystery of creation. However, archaeology lacks reliable written or oral evidence of quartz skulls from pre-Columbian cultures. No confirmed excavation in Central America has unearthed such objects in a clear cultural context. The grinding technique also leans towards a later origin. Some studies suggest that fine scratches on the surface could have been made by rotating tools, similar to those used by modern engravers. This casts doubt on the idea of the artifacts being millennia old. And yet, the mystery remains. Even if these objects were created in the 19th century, their craftsmanship commands respect and wonder. Why would someone spend dozens or hundreds of hours creating such complex objects? Why specifically the skull form? And why did no one document their creation process? Crystal skulls are a vivid example of how even later artifacts can acquire legendary status. They occupy a borderline zone between art, craftsmanship, and mysticism, between science, faith, and fiction. Regardless of their true origin, they continue to stir the imagination, reminding us that not all objects found on Earth fit neatly into a straightforward historical textbook narrative. Chapter 5. The Baghdad Battery. Electricity in Ancient Mesopotamia. I recall 1938. German archaeologist Wilhelm König, then director of the Baghdad Museum, made a statement that sparked controversy that continues to this day. As a result of excavations conducted near the ancient settlement of Kujut Rabu, not far from modern Baghdad, several mysterious objects were discovered, later dubbed the Baghdad Batteries. These were seemingly simple terracotta vessels, about 15 centimeters tall. Inside each vessel was a copper cylinder, rolled from a thin sheet, and an iron rod was inserted into its center. All of this was secured with bitumen, a natural asphalt that served as both a sealant and an insulator. What did the analysis reveal? Analysis showed that the copper and iron were not directly connected. There was space between them, where an acidic liquid, such as vinegar or grape juice, could theoretically be poured to act as an electrolyte. König put forward a bold hypothesis. Before me was the simplest galvanic cell, capable of generating direct electrical current. Under standard conditions, such a structure could produce a voltage of 1 to 2 V, and by connecting several such elements in series, a voltage sufficient for electrochemical reactions could be obtained. Such unusual claims naturally sparked immediate response within the scientific community. In the mid-20th century, a number of researchers, including those in the US and Germany, conducted experiments replicating the battery's design. In each case, electrical voltage, albeit extremely low, was successfully recorded. Thus, Koenig's hypothesis received laboratory confirmation. However, the main pressing question remained: why would such devices be needed by people living in Mesopotamia 2,000 years ago, during the Parthian or early Sassanid period in Iran? There are no mentions of electricity use in known ancient texts, nor is there evidence of the use of conductors, lamps, electric tools, or electrometallurgy in this region at that time. Some proponents of alternative theories suggested that these devices might have been used for electroplating metals, for example, to apply a thin layer of gold onto other metallic objects. However, none of the examined archaeological artifacts from that era bear traces of electrolytic coating characteristic of electroplating. Metal objects made of gold, silver, and copper, found in ancient Mesopotamia, were manufactured using traditional smelting and forging methods. And what about official archaeology? It leans towards more conservative versions. Some researchers believe that the vessel's design might have been used not as an energy source, but for storing scrolls, magical talismans, or as part of a ritual set. Associated finds support this version. Similar vessels without metal inserts were found in the same locality. However, the design remains unusual, practically screaming its uniqueness. Natural insulation, material selection, isolated placement of electrodes, and the empty internal space between them all make sense from an engineering perspective. If the purpose was not electricity, then why does the design almost perfectly match that of a simple battery? It seems to some theorists that the knowledge of creating electricity might have been lost in antiquity, remaining at the level of a technological experiment or limited use. Others believe that the very idea of electricity was borrowed from even older, entirely vanished cultures whose knowledge reached later civilizations in a distorted form. Hopes for answers significantly diminished after the original artifacts were reportedly lost or damaged during the looting of the Baghdad Museum in 2003. Today, most research is based on copies and records made before the hostilities began. The Baghdad Battery is one of those rare instances where an ancient artifact aligns with a modern engineering concept. It could be evidence of an accidental discovery, a forgotten technology, or simply a striking coincidence. But in any case, it commands respect and raises questions for which there are, as yet, no convincing answers. Chapter 6. The Stone Spheres of Costa Rica. Perfect spheres from an unknown past. I tried to imagine. In the first half of the 20th century, while clearing jungles for future banana plantations, workers of the United Fruit Company in southern Costa Rica, in the Diquís Delta region, stumbled upon truly unusual objects. Perfectly round stone spheres emerged from the earth. They were found both individually and in groups, sometimes dozens at a time. The spheres varied in diameter from a few centimeters to over 2 meters, with the largest weighing up to 16 tons. Since then, over 300 such objects have been recorded. Their primary material was granodiorite, a very hard igneous rock, less commonly limestone. The stone carving is so precise that for some spheres, the deviation from a perfect sphere does not exceed fractions of a percent. The question of how such precision could have been achieved without metal tools remains open to this day, like a silent reproach to our science. The exact time of creation of these spheres has not yet been established. However, in several cases, they were found in archaeological layers associated with the Diquís culture, an indigenous civilization that existed in southern Costa Rica from approximately the 6th to the 10th centuries CE. This suggested that members of this culture might have been the creators of the mysterious stone spheres. Nevertheless, none of the spheres have been found in a clearly documented context, along with tools or technological devices that could explain their creation. What then was the purpose of these objects? Their creation's objective also sparks much debate. Some of the spheres were arranged in geometric patterns, triangles, straight lines, and even spirals. However, most of them have been moved from their original locations. In the mid-20th century, many spheres were removed or damaged during agricultural and development activities. Some workers even dynamited them in search of supposed gold treasures, naively believing local legends. Among scientific theories, the prevailing assumption is that the spheres served a ritual sacred function, symbolizing celestial bodies, or were status objects indicating the power of chiefs. It has also been hypothesized that they might have been used as elements of an ancient astronomical system or calendar. However, there are no written sources confirming these conjectures. The Dikis culture left no written records, and this only complicates the task. How did scholars approach the study of these spheres? In the mid-20th century, an archaeological expedition led by Samuel Lothrop of Harvard University's Peabody Museum began systematic study of the artifacts. Researchers conducted geodesic measurements, photography, and mapping of the discovered spheres. Studies confirmed that most of the spheres are indeed almost perfect spheres. However, their method of production remains unknown. No stone blocks or tools related to the processing of granodiorite have been found. Attempts to reproduce such a sphere by hand showed that the process requires months of meticulous labor, even with metal tools. Furthermore, according to the generally accepted version, the ancient inhabitants of the region did not possess iron or steel and primarily used stone and wooden tools. As expected, some researchers, particularly proponents of alternative theories, suggested external assistance, from a forgotten highly advanced civilization to extraterrestrial intervention. These ideas do not find support within the academic community. However, the facts themselves, precision, size, sheer quantity, and lack of a clear explanation, make the spheres a convenient basis for such hypotheses. In 2014, the stone spheres were inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List as part of the archaeological complex and ancient settlements of the Dikis culture with stone spheres. Today, most of the surviving objects can be seen in museums or archaeological parks in Costa Rica, particularly in the city of Palmar. However, some spheres are still located on private properties or in open areas, where they are gradually deteriorating due to time and weather conditions. The stone spheres of Costa Rica are a rare example of a phenomenon that is both simple and inexplicable. They contain no hidden mechanisms, no inscriptions, no gold, only geometry, mass, and perfect form. And it is precisely this that holds their main mystery. Who, how, and why hundreds of perfectly round objects were created from hard volcanic rock in an era when, according to all known information, humans did not even possess elementary tools for such work. Chapter 7. The London Hammer. A tool encased in stone hundreds of millions of years ago. I recall this story. In 1934, near the small town of London, Texas, USA, the couple Max and Emma Hahn, while strolling along a creek bed, noticed an unusual stone. A piece of wood protruded from a fragment of rock, and upon closer inspection, it turned out to be a handle extending deep into the stone. The couple decided to take the find with them. Sometime later, they carefully broke open the stone and discovered an object resembling an ancient hammer inside. It was a metal object with a wooden handle, part of which had mineralized, while the other remained in its wooden form. What was the hammer's shape? The hammerhead was made of a metal alloy and had a distinctive shape, a cylinder with rounded ends, approximately 17 centimeters long and 3 centimeters in diameter. The most intriguing part of this story was the origin of the stone in which the hammer was embedded. Geologists who examined the artifact concluded that the rock surrounding the tool's head resembled limestone dating back to the lower Cretaceous period, meaning it was about 100 million years old. If this is indeed the case, an inconceivable paradox arises. A metal tool of human origin was found embedded in a geological formation, which, according to scientific classification, formed long before the appearance of humans as a species. What did the chemical analysis reveal? Chemical analysis of the metal showed that the alloy consisted of 96% iron, about 2% chlorine, and 1% sulfur. Surprisingly, no signs of corrosion were found on the metal's surface, despite its supposed antiquity. Researchers noted that the alloy's structure differs from that characteristic of modern industrial iron smelting methods. This raises profound questions. These contradictions have given rise to numerous theories. Some proponents of the forbidden archaeology hypothesis consider the London hammer direct evidence of a highly advanced civilization existing long before our known history. Others suggest it is a so-called concretion, an artifact that became encased in sedimentary rock through a process of mineralization that occurred much later. However, proponents of mainstream geology argue that the stone itself could be a secondary deposit, which solidified much later than the main part of the layer it superficially resembles. How does the scientific community view this? The scientific community is largely skeptical of the hammer. The main objections boil down to the existence of carbonate formations in the discovery area that can solidify within a few decades or centuries. That is, the hammer could very well have fallen into a mineralizing environment, subsequently becoming encased in a solid mass that superficially resembles ancient rock. An argument in favor of this version is that the object was found outside any archaeological layer and therefore lacking a reliable geological context. And yet, some researchers, especially outside academic circles, continue to assert that the case of the London hammer defies explanation. They cite the precision of its form, the high quality of the metal, the presence of chlorine inclusions, and the complete absence of signs of wear and corrosion. Furthermore, the mineralized wood of the handle, they argue, indicates an extremely ancient origin of the object. Today, the London hammer is housed in a private collection and exhibited in one of Texas's creationist museums. Its study continues, but mainstream science does not yet recognize it as proof of an ancient technological civilization. The story of the London hammer is a vivid example of how a single discovery can challenge established scientific beliefs. Even if it is proven in the future that the artifact was recently encased in a mineralizing environment, the very history of its discovery continues to draw interest as a symbol of the clash between scientific orthodoxy and alternative views on humanity's past. Chapter 8: The Kensington Runestone. Vikings in the heart of America. I envision this scene as if I were there. In 1898, on a farm near the town of Kensington, Minnesota, USA, a farmer named Olaf Oman was uprooting a tree stump. Beneath the roots, he stumbled upon a flat slab of gray sandstone, about 76 centimeters long, 43 centimeters wide, and 15 centimeters thick. The stone's surface was covered with carved signs strikingly resembling runic inscriptions known from Scandinavian written monuments. Since then, the Kensington Runestone has become one of the most controversial artifacts in American archaeology, sparking fierce debate. What does the inscription on the stone say? The inscription on its front and sides, presumably written in medieval Swedish using the runic alphabet, states the following: In 1360, 8 Goths and 22 Norwegians undertook an exploratory expedition west from Vinland and reached the interior regions of the modern North American continent. The text recounts a tragedy. According to the authors, 10 members of the expedition were killed away from camp, likely as a result of conflict with the indigenous population. The stone, according to the inscription's meaning, was left as a memorial to the deceased and as proof of the Scandinavians' presence in these lands. At the end of the inscription is the date, 1362, and the signature, "We are 10 men by the river with fish." What was the reaction of the first experts? The first experts, including specialists from Scandinavia, regarded the find with skepticism. One of the main arguments was the lack of mention of such an expedition in Icelandic sagas or other 14th century sources. The linguistic form also came under criticism. The text contains both ancient runic symbols and some word forms, which, according to several linguists, are more characteristic of 19th century Swedish. In 1910, the Minnesota Geological Survey conducted a rock analysis which showed that the depth and form of the carvings were consistent with a chisel-like tool, and no traces of modern mechanical impact were found. However, this does not rule out the possibility that the inscription was made manually in the 19th century, especially if its author possessed at least a basic knowledge of runic writing. But what do the proponents of the stone's authenticity say? They point to several factors that make me wonder. Firstly, farmer Olaf Oman himself had no formal education, and according to eyewitnesses, could barely read Norwegian, let alone runic script. Secondly, geological analysis showed that the surface of the carved symbols shows signs of natural erosion, which supposedly indicates the inscription's considerable age. Thirdly, after discovering the stone, Oman made no attempts at commercial gain, handing it over to the university and insisting on its scientific study. And what is the opinion of its opponents? They believe that the artifact is the result of a hoax, possibly created by one or more Scandinavian immigrants living in the region in the late 19th century. It is known that at that time, there was an active Scandinavian diaspora in Minnesota, including some who were interested in runic writing and Viking history. However, subsequent research has revealed additional artifacts that supposedly indicate a possible Scandinavian presence deep within North America. In particular, finds of Scandinavian origin have been recorded in the Great Lakes region, although their interpretation also sparks heated debates. Today, the Kensington runestone is exhibited at the Runestone Museum in Alexandria, Minnesota. A whole historical and cultural narrative has been built around it, supported by local residents and regional historians. It has become a symbol of an alternative version of the discovery of America long before Christopher Columbus. The scientific community remains divided into camps. Some consider the artifact a forgery with folkloric elements, others an underestimated historical source. There is no final consensus. The stone remains in a gray area between the possible and the impossible, between science and legend. The Kensington runestone is a challenge to academic history. If it is authentic, it means that Vikings penetrated deep into the continent centuries before European colonizers. If it is a fake, then it is one of the most elaborate historical hoaxes in the history of the United States of America. Chapter 9. The Tolima Gold Airplanes, Technology or Symbol. In Colombia, in the territory of the ancient kingdom of Tolima, archaeologists in the early 20th century began finding miniature gold figurines made using the lost wax casting technique. These objects, known as the Tolima Gold Airplanes, at first glance appear to be stylized representations of animals. However, upon closer inspection, they strikingly resemble modern aircraft, with streamlined bodies, wings, a vertical stabilizer, and even what resembles a cockpit. More than a dozen such artifacts are known, and their resemblance to airplanes is astonishing. What are their dimensions, and what are they made of? Their length varies from 2 to 10 centimeter. They are made of an alloy of gold with added copper, a traditional material for pre-Columbian metallurgy in the region. The main discovery sites are burial complexes and treasuries of the Tolima culture, which flourished in the territory of the modern Tolima department in central Colombia between the 6th and 10th centuries CE. The figurines were classified by archaeologists as zoomorphic, meaning depicting animals. However, no known living creature, from either modern or prehistoric fauna, has such a characteristic body configuration as these objects. Straight delta wings, a clearly defined vertical stabilizer, symmetrical tail fins, and a central fuselage. What happened in 1994? German engineers Peter Belting and Algund Eilenberger conducted a curious experiment. They enlarged one of the figurines approximately 65 times, equipped it with an engine and a remote control system. The resulting model successfully flew, demonstrating airborne stability and maneuverability. This sparked a wave of interest among proponents of theories about ancient advanced technologies. However, mainstream science takes a skeptical stance. Archaeologists point out that generalized forms in pre-Columbian art did not always adhere to realism. Depictions of jaguars, birds, fish, and reptiles often took on symbolic or abstract forms. What other suggestions were made? Ideas were put forward that the figurines might depict stylized insects, such as dragonflies or butterflies. However, these hypotheses do not explain the presence of a distinct vertical tail fin, an element almost never found in nature but characteristic of aircraft. The technological level of the Tolima culture should also be considered. Although they achieved great mastery in metalworking and jewelry making, there is no evidence that they possessed technical knowledge of aerodynamics. Archaeological sites in the region contain no evidence of complex mechanisms, wheeled constructions, or writing. The only means of transmitting information were oral traditions and artistic representations, and yet the enigma remains. The creation of such figurines requires precision and an understanding of symmetry. The very idea of giving a miniature object a form so similar to an aircraft design still causes bewilderment, especially considering that the official beginning of the aviation era is associated with the Wright brothers' flight in 1903, more than 1,000 years after these artifacts were created. Proponents of alternative hypotheses continue to insist that the figurines are evidence of either contact with extraterrestrial beings or knowledge of flight principles lost in subsequent centuries. However, no convincing evidence for these theories has yet been found. The Tolima gold airplanes are currently housed in the Gold Museum in Bogotá, where they occupy a special place among thousands of other objects created by ancient indigenous artisans. They attract attention not only for their form, but also for the questions that still remain unanswered. Are they simply the product of ancient artists' imagination or a hint of forgotten knowledge? There is no answer yet, but the figurines themselves, carved from gold, are silent, and this silence speaks louder than any hypothesis. Chapter 10, The Voynich Manuscript. The book no one can read. I clearly envision this scene. In 1912, a Polish bookseller and collector of ancient texts named Wilfrid Voynich acquired a batch of old books from the Jesuit college Villa Mondragone near Rome. Among the manuscripts, he discovered an unusual codex written on parchment with mysterious illustrations and text in an unknown cipher. Since then, this discovery has gone down in history as the Voynich manuscript, one of the most enigmatic and debated documents in the history of linguistics and cryptography. It became a challenge for the most brilliant minds. What is the book's structure? The book consists of 240 pages, although originally, judging by the numbering, there were probably around 270 pages. The page format is approximately 23 by 16 cm. The parchment is made of calfskin, and the ink is water-based, using natural dyes and an iron gall compound. The illustrations are hand-colored. The main mystery, however, lies in the text. It is written in an unknown language using a unique alphabet comprising about 25 and 30 different symbols. These symbols have no direct analogues in any known alphabet, neither Latin, Greek, Arabic, nor Hebrew. Moreover, the text is written so fluently, without smudges or errors, that it creates the impression the author was proficient in this language. When did decipherment attempts begin? The first cryptographers began studying the manuscript soon after its appearance in Europe. Throughout the 20th century, the document was investigated by both amateurs and specialists, including cryptanalysts who worked during World War II. But despite all efforts, no one has been able to decipher a single paragraph with verifiable accuracy. The manuscript contains illustrations that conventionally divide it into several sections: botanical, astronomical, biological, pharmaceutical, and recipe. What do the illustrations depict? The botanical section shows plants that do not exist in nature. Each page features one or two plants composed of elements resembling roots, stems, flowers, and leaves, but not corresponding to any known botanical species. The astronomical section contains images of stars, the sun, the moon, circles, spirals, and zodiacal symbols. Many of the diagrams are accompanied by short captions in the same enigmatic script. What is particularly intriguing is the biological section. It depicts nude women, often partially submerged in strange reservoirs connected by tubes and channels. These scenes are sometimes interpreted as depictions of anatomy or birth processes. The recipe section lists short paragraphs with strange jars, ampules, and vessels depicted next to them. It is presumed that these might be instructions for preparing potions or infusions. However, due to the language's undeciphered nature, these conjectures remain at the level of hypotheses. When was the manuscript created? In 2009, radiocarbon dating of the parchment, conducted at the University of Arizona, showed that the material dates between 1404 and 1438. That is, the manuscript was created in the first half of the 15th century. Analysis of the ink confirmed that it was applied during the same period, which rules out a later forgery. Some historians suggested that the author could have been Roger Bacon, an English philosopher and scholar of the 13th century. However, the dating discrepancy makes this version unlikely. Other conjectured authors include alchemists, monastic healers, representatives of the Hermetic tradition, or even unknown women's societies involved in medicine and herbalism. What about mystical interpretations? Proponents of mystical interpretations believe that the manuscript is a magical or esoteric text, accessible only to initiates. Alternative theories assert that the manuscript's language is artificial, possibly created to conceal information comprehensible only to a select few. Some view it as an elaborate hoax, carried out with the aim of deception or demonstrating genius. What conclusion have modern cryptographers reached? Modern cryptographers, using machine learning algorithms, have concluded that the text's structure is not random. The distribution of symbols, repetitions, syntactic patterns, and frequency analysis indicate that it is a meaningful text in a real, albeit unknown, language. Yet, many words are repeated, but not a single sentence has been accurately deciphered. The Voynich manuscript is housed at the Beinica Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University in New Haven, Connecticut. Its digital copy is freely accessible and remains a subject of study for experts worldwide. More than 100 years have passed since its discovery, but the enigma remains unsolved. No one knows who wrote it, why, in what language, or what exactly it contains. The Voynich manuscript is a challenge to time, science, and the understanding of the human mind. It is an example of how a single document can shake the certainty that everything can be explained. Chapter 11. The Ica Stones. Images that shouldn't exist. I tried to imagine, in the desert regions of Peru's southern coast, near the city of Ica, strange stone artifacts began to appear starting in the mid-20th century. These were dark basaltic boulders and pebbles covered with engraved images. They soon became known as the Ica Stones and sparked one of the greatest archaeological controversies of modern times. It's a true mystery. What are the dimensions of these stones? They ranged from a few centimeters to over a meter in length. The total mass of known specimens is estimated in tons. In total, by various estimates, between 10,000 and 15,000 such stones have been collected and documented. The main part of the collection was in the possession of Peruvian physician Javier Cabrera Darquea, who dedicated decades of his life to their study and popularization. The most intriguing aspect, of course, is the engravings. The stones depict scenes that, according to many, could not have existed in the context of pre-Columbian South America. The drawings include the following categories: humans interacting with dinosaurs, including scenes of hunting and taming dinosaurs; complex surgical operations, including organ transplants, neurosurgery, cesarean sections, and the use of incredibly precise medical instruments; geographical maps strikingly resembling the outlines of Atlantis or antediluvian Earth maps; and even astronomical diagrams, including depictions of telescopes, star systems, and planets. What are these stones made of? The stones are made of andesite, a hard volcanic rock. The engravings were made with visible traces of oxidation, which led Cabrera to claim that some images were tens of thousands of years old. He put forth the hypothesis of an ancient, highly advanced civilization that existed on Earth before a global catastrophe, presumably one that destroyed it. According to Cabrera, this civilization possessed knowledge in anatomy, astronomy, and even genetics. However, the scientific community met such claims with deep skepticism. The main arguments are as follows. Firstly, no recorded archaeological contexts exist in which these stones could be reliably dated. Most specimens came from local residents, huaqueros, professional artifact hunters who often forged finds for profit. What was revealed in 1970? Secondly, in 1970, Peruvian authorities began an investigation into the stone's origin. During interrogations, several local farmers confessed that they themselves had been making the stones based on samples sold to tourists and collectors. In particular, one of the most active suppliers, Basilio Ushuaia, publicly stated that he produced fake stones using metal nails and knives. This blow to the theory was devastating, but what do the proponents of the stone's authenticity say? Proponents of the stone's authenticity assert that there are specimens found long before the commercialization of the phenomenon. Some of these were allegedly documented as early as the 19th century and discovered during official archaeological excavations, although no published reports with scientific expertise exist. The quality of some of the images is of particular interest. Some of the stones indeed show a high level of detail and understanding of anatomy, including depictions of the human brain, digestive organs, and reproductive system. There are also alleged cases where the oxidation of the engraving matches the general patination layer, which theoretically could indicate great age. However, such cases are extremely rare and have not been confirmed by independent scientific laboratories. The Ica stones hold a special place among controversial artifacts. They are either a major archaeological discovery, proving the existence of an ancient civilization, or an elaborate hoax fueled by greed and sensationalism. In scientific circles, they are most often classified as pseudo-artifacts, objects without archaeological context, whose authenticity cannot be verified by objective methods. Javier Cabrera's collection is now housed in a private museum in the city of Ica. Despite the lack of recognition from academic science, the stones continue to attract the attention of tourists, amateur researchers, and proponents of alternative history. And as long as most of the images remain undated, the question remains: how could images of brain surgeries and extinct dinosaurs have ended up in the hands of a 20th century peasant? The Ica stones are a challenge not only to science, but also to human intuition. They make one wonder: what if there are forgotten eras about which not a single line has been preserved in textbooks, not a single entry in chronicles, only stones, holding the image of the impossible? Chapter 12. Conclusion. On the border between reality and fiction. So, over the past 11 chapters, we have examined 10 genuine artifacts, each of which, in its own way, challenges the conventional view of the past. These are not legends or conjectures. All the objects genuinely exist. They are stored in museums, private collections, and scientific institutions. They can be measured, weighed, and studied, but they cannot yet be explained, and this leaves me bewildered. Let's recall what exactly surprised us. The Antikythera mechanism demonstrates that ancient engineers possessed knowledge that historians believe only emerged several centuries later. The Phaistos disk remains undeciphered despite all advances in cryptography and linguistics. The crystal skulls, whether fakes or not, are astonishing in their craftsmanship and have spawned their own mythology. The so-called Baghdad battery is a reminder that even in antiquity, people could create technologies whose principles we only understand today. The stone spheres of Costa Rica are geometric perfection with no apparent purpose. The London hammer is a simple tool embedded in stone whose age may contradict all official chronology. The Kensington runestone is a runic text that is either a forgery or evidence that Vikings penetrated deep into North America long before Columbus. The golden figurines from the Tolima culture resemble modern airplanes, although they were created long before even the first hot air balloons appeared. The Voynich manuscript is a book that thousands have seen, but no one has understood. The Ica stones are artifacts where some see a child's prank, while others see evidence of a lost civilization that understood anatomy, astronomy, and perhaps a different history than our own. What unites all these objects? They have one thing in common: they do not provide ready answers. They do not fit into textbooks, lack clear definitions, and are not unconditionally accepted by the academic community. But it is precisely why they are valuable. The scientific approach demands doubt, verification, and replication. The historical method requires sources, context, and evidence. These artifacts go against both approaches. They exist, but the explanation of their origin and purpose lies beyond what is currently considered reliable knowledge. Should humanity's history be revised based on them? Probably not, at least not yet. But we must admit that we do not know everything about the past, and the more we study, the clearer it becomes. History has shadows, and time has gaps that might have concealed technologies, peoples, and ideas we can't even imagine. These artifacts are not, in themselves, irrefutable proof of an ancient, highly advanced civilization, but they are traces of what is possible, traces that humanity has always been capable of more than official history attributes to it. Perhaps one day new discoveries will fill these gaps, or perhaps some mysteries will forever remain beyond understanding. And yet, they are real. They exist, and this makes them far more important than any legend